vanilla for the win. I did not see that coming. And because I didn't, my life as a happily married man ended after 22 years, 5 months, 6 days, and who gives a shit how many hours. All because I wanted to order a fucking pizza and was too lazy to walk into the kitchen to get my phone off the charger. Surprisingly, my wife's phone was on the end table at the other end of our sofa. I say surprisingly because it's a rare time when that thing isn't attached to her hand or stuffed into a pocket. Especially during these last few months, now that I think about it, when she's been leaving the room to text, not to mention to talk. I heard the shower running upstairs, which I thought was odd for a late Saturday afternoon. But I really didn't give it a second thought when I grabbed her phone to place a carryout order at our favorite pizza place. We hadn't discussed any plans for the evening, and with nothing already cooking in the kitchen, that usually meant a pizza for me and an order of pasta primavera for her. Except when I hit her home button to get into the phone, the damn thing asked me for a password. I've got to admit, I looked at the phone like it had just cursed at me and gave it a hard squeeze in retaliation. Fuck you, iPhone, I thought before I immediately started wondering what the damn password would be. It was only as I was trying to guess that did the more important thought as to why it was locked smack me in the face. We'd had matching iPhones for years, and neither of us had ever locked them before. The last time I'd actually used her phone, maybe 8 months ago, was to check on the weather, and it wasn't locked then. I'm an amateur computer phone geek, so I took the password request as a challenge. After a minute's thought, I punched in the last 4 numbers of her social security number. Knowing that was the combination she had set for our home safe, that had all our important papers in it, like our birth certificates and our passports. The phone opened right away, showing her messages screen. I noticed her best friend, Jan Jefferson, was at the top of the list, meaning that Tracy had texted her last before going up into the shower. I probably shouldn't have peeked at the message tree, knowing it was a violation of her right to privacy, but then again, she was my wife. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal if I just peeked to see what she and Jan had been texting about. Could the price of an expensive pair of shoes really be that private? The pain I suddenly felt in my chest would have knocked me over had I been standing up. I started to suck in air like a man who was being suffocated. Things got squirrely. I wasn't sure if I passed out, but when I next felt lucid, I realized I had tears in my eyes and I couldn't focus. Suffice it to say, I had found out why my wife was in the shower, and that her evening's planned activities with someone named Neville weren't their first go-round. I read the entire conversation, and had started to scroll through to see if there were others when I heard the shower end. So I closed out of the app, locked her phone, and put it back exactly where it was when I picked it up. Feeling like somebody had just hit me in the stomach with a baseball bat, I flopped back down onto my end of the sofa, staring into nothingness. Sometime later, Tracy came downstairs and walked into the family room. She was dressed nicely, but not over the top nice. A good touch, I thought to myself. I was pleased that I didn't jump up and choke the shit out of her. I decided to see where this was going to go. Hey, babe, I'm going to meet up with Jan and the girls tonight. You don't have a problem with that, do you? She asked, innocence practically dripping off her every word. I watched carefully as she moved around the room. If she felt any guilt, I certainly couldn't see it. Fuck. 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 I'm good with that, sweetie. I'll just order a pizza and chill watching the Twins play the Rangers tonight, I answered, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. Two could play the acting game. By the way, you look good. I've always liked that blue dress on you. Maybe I should come along to fight off any guy who might get the wrong idea, I said. She didn't realize I could see her grimace a bit when I said that. I knew the last thing she'd want tonight is my vanilla ass tagging along. I really do love him, Jan, but he's so vanilla, she had texted her friend earlier. Neville is anything but. I get wet just thinking about him. She grabbed her phone from the end table and headed out the door, probably leaving quickly so I couldn't make good on my threat to go with her. I knew she was meeting Neville at the Red Lion for dinner before they headed back to his apartment for several hours of carnal pleasure. I wasn't serious about tagging along, but this vanilla guy was definitely going to make an appearance before the night was over. Knowing I had some time to kill, I sat back on my sofa and reminisced about my marriage. Up until a little bit ago, I would have called our marriage just about perfect. I never had a clue that Trossie thought I was boring in bed and unhappy with my performance. I always made sure she was never left wanting, and if her screaming was any indication, I couldn't have been too boring in bed. I had a lot of questions swirling around in my head, not the least of which was how long this affair had been going on. We had been married for 22 years, and just that fast I knew we weren't going to make the quarter-century mark. By profession, I was a certified public accountant, and probably by temperament as well. I was analytical and quiet, not given to flights of fancy or anger, which may explain why my wife thinks I'm vanilla. Considering we've been married so long and raised 2 children, she's seen that I can be passionate in both life and in the bedroom. I was confused and hurt, and my anger was starting to heat up like a stone hearth oven. I knew my wife and her friend had 6 p.m. reservations, so I pulled into the back of the Red Lion parking lot at 7 to watch the door. My game plan was to follow the two to Neville's home, since I had no idea who he was beyond his first name. I remember back to the first time I laid eyes on the woman who would become my wife. She was making ice cream sundaes at a Sunday social at my church, and I, along with several other guys, were immediately taken with the curvy brunette with green eyes. I had to wade through several other young guys to get a chance to talk with her that day, but it was well worth the wait. She was smart and well-spoken, in addition to being pretty. I got her name and number that day, but didn't call her for 2 weeks. I figured that would give time for all the pretenders to get out of my way. Our courtship was relatively quick. We dated for 8 months before I asked her to marry me. We were married 8 months after that. We had our son, Larry, 2 years after that, with our daughter, Delilah, coming along 18 months later. Both kids were now in college, which, in hindsight, might have been the beginning of the end for my marriage. I noticed that Trossie seemed to be pulling away from me slightly, but when I tried to bounce her about it, she told me I was being paranoid. Paranoid? My name is Daniel. I was shocked when Trossie came out of the restaurant about 7:20, followed closely by a tall, fit young guy who looked to be about 20 years younger than her 47. I really had no expectations as to what her lover would look like, but I certainly wasn't expecting a fucking kid. I suppose he was handsome, although I'm hardly a good judge of the male of the species. He had a mop of curly brown hair. He looked to be about 30 pounds and 3 inches bigger than me. Considering he was fucking my wife, I wondered if his dick was bigger than mine as well. I watched the two of them kiss before getting into his car and driving off. I followed them a decent distance behind, knowing that the last thing they were expecting was to be followed by me in my vanilla car, of course. They pulled up in front of an apartment building after a 15-minute drive and walked into the building, the man ushering my wife in with his arm around her waist. A minute later, I saw a light go on in a third-floor apartment. Considering that I knew that they had done this at least several times, I didn't feel the need to rush up there immediately. I wanted to give them a chance to get started, then put the kibosh to that. I waited about 15 minutes, my anger rising with each minute, before I went to the apartment door I assumed was Neville's. That was confirmed by my wife screaming out a loud orgasm, then crying out for more. What the fuck? I'm in the hallway hearing her screaming when at home she acts like she's in a fucking church. Fuck me harder, Nev! Fuck me harder, she yelled. My incessant banging on the door finally got a result as Neville, wrapped in a robe, answered the door, looking none too happy. That made 2 of us, and I hauled off and hit the big bastard square in the nose, staggering him backwards and causing blood to explode from his face, before my second shot hit him square in the chest, knocking him on his butt. I stomped into the apartment past the prone bastard and headed toward where I figured the bedroom was, finding my apparently naked wife cowering under the sheets. She had heard the quick altercation, but didn't know exactly what had happened and who it was at the door, so when I appeared in the bedroom doorway, her eyes got as big as an owl's. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Don't come home. You don't live with me any longer, I yelled, spittle flying out of my mouth. Call me in a few days and I'll let you come by and get your stuff. She finally found her voice and answered back as I turned to leave. No, what? No, go. Wait. It's not, she started, but then suddenly stopped. Neddy Warren. Loverboy was stretched out on the floor and moaning into his hands when I was about to walk past him. Still running on 100% adrenaline, I slammed my foot down on his unprotected midsection, hearing what I assumed were ribs breaking. I walked through the door of his apartment without pulling it closed behind me, got into my car, and drove home. I suppose having rage and surprise on my side worked out well for me, because the last time I fought anyone was in 6th grade, and I got my ass kicked then. Neville was considerably larger than me, but I don't think it took me more than 10 seconds to put him on his back. Not bad for a vanilla guy, I thought as I pulled my car into my garage. Still in somewhat of a rage, I grabbed a bottle of Jack Daniels from my liquor cabinet and poured 3 fingers into a regular drinking glass. Then went stomping around my house, destroying several knickknacks Tracy had bought by throwing them against the closest wall. I then grabbed my favorite knife from my bedroom end table and impaled it through our wedding photo in our bedroom. I might have done more damage, but the doorbell ringing brought me back to reality. I can't say I was surprised when I found 2 police officers on my doorstep. I opened the door and beckoned them inside. The first officer responded by waving me back, then with his hand resting on his gun walked in, followed by the second officer, also having his hand on his gun. I watched them both take a good look around at the debris I had left on the walls and floors from smashing knickknacks. The police told me they were responding to a complaint made by someone named Neville Douglas. It seemed Mr. Douglas had been attacked in his apartment and had suffered a broken nose and 2 broken ribs. Although Neville wasn't sure who the attacker was, the woman who was at the apartment with him confirmed to the cops that it was me, her husband. I thought it was rather nice of the cops not to call me her cuckold husband. We understand you were completely justified in beating him senseless, but we can't allow every jilted husband to exact revenge with his fists, the first officer said to me. He wants you arrested and brought up on charges. Okay, I get it, but for the record, I didn't beat him. I only hit him twice, I said quietly, hoping that telling the truth would lessen my sentence. Both officers looked me up and down, then appeared to be impressed. Huh. I guess Mr. Douglas just picked the wrong woman's husband then, the second officer noted. I agreed to go with the officers quietly, after they said I could have a few minutes to get some personal things done on my computer. While they watched me carefully, I moved half of our checking and savings into an account that was only in my name, and then paid off and closed our 2 joint credit cards. I wish I had done that first when I caught my wife cheating on me, the first officer said. It took me almost a year before the courts made her give me back my share. I had to live with my parents just to get by. Well, if I don't miss my guess, I'm not going to have to worry about my living arrangements for a while, I chuckled. I guess Loverboy didn't like having his clock cleaned by a vanilla old guy. I saw the 2 officers give each other looks at what to them was my cryptic statement. I didn't feel the need to let them in on the joke, such as it was. I was at a complete loss when Tracy fought the divorce I filed while I was in jail. I was going to be incarcerated for a while, so I thought this would have worked perfect for Tracy. I love you, Dan. I have some feelings for Neville, but I don't love him like I love you, Tracy told me when she visited me in jail. How can you profess to love me when you've been cheating on me for, do you? I don't know how long, I questioned. Neville excites you. You get wet just thinking about meeting up with him. Me, I'm just vanilla. I no longer excite you. I'm just here. As what? Your backup plan? I watched as several emotions played across her face, the most prevalent one being shock. She had no clue I had seen her phone, so she was confused when I gave her a Reader's Digest version of that text conversation with her best friend, Jan, which I had seen. I didn't plan on this, Dan. It just happened. He's a coworker and a friend. He's a really nice guy. I think you 2 would get along if you had met under different circumstances. It was probably a good thing we were separated by a table, or I might have tried to choke the shit out of her. I grimaced and growled. How long, Trace? Were there others? I snarled through my teeth. I guess about 8 months now. Neville is the only one, she responded. I had been feeling so old and out of sorts with the kids gone. He reinvigorated me. You and I are the same old. He was something new, and he's forceful. And I enjoy it. Him. But that Doesn't mean I don't still love you. I do. Very much. I don't want a divorce, Dan. Jay, that makes absolutely no sense to me. You don't get to have a husband and a lover. That's not how marriage works, Tracy. So now you're going to be in jail for a while, she interjected. Why don't you just put the divorce on hold until you get out? Think about it. Nothing has to change while you're in jail. We can make the big decisions when you get out. Why did you have to beat him so badly, Dan? I didn't beat him. Why does everyone keep saying that? Vanilla Guy only hit him twice, I asserted. No, Guy Rye. Only twice? He's so much bigger than you and younger and fitter, she said. Rage is the great equalizer, babe. And, surprise, fucker went down like a sack of shit. She pursed her lips and breathed heavily through her nose. I could tell she was thinking hard. Nay. How did you find out about us? She asked. I thought we were so careful. Did you really just ask me that question? I growled. She refused to sign the divorce papers, knowing that I wasn't going anywhere for a few years. 6 months later, I found out from my son on a visit that she had moved Neville into our home with her. That was the same day I got into a fight in the prison library and sent another convict to the infirmary, earning me a month in solitary confinement. He's not such a bad guy, Dad, and he keeps Mom from being lonely, Eric said. You know one. If he's not such a bad guy, then how come I'm in here and he's sleeping with that cheating skank you call your mother? I asked rather pointedly. Technically, we're still married. I wanted to get a divorce. She refused to sign. So you think it's okay with her living with her lover? Eric grimaced, then got up and ended our visit. My kids alternated their visits, coming once each month. 6 months later, my daughter, Sherry, accidentally dropped another bomb on me, mentioning how cute her mother looked with her growing baby bump diet. What the fuck did you just say, Cher? I interrupted while she was chatterboxing away. About which thing, Dad? She asked. Now on Rhino. You mother's growing baby bump? Sherry's mouth dropped open and she blushed crimson. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say anything about that. Can't we just pretend I never said anything? She asked. Baby, you might have just given me the keys to the kingdom, I commented. Start talking. 5 minutes later, I found out that Tracy was 3 months pregnant with Neville's child. Seems like she wasn't quite regular with her birth control pills after I went to jail, even after Neville moved in. 5 minutes after that, I was on the phone with my attorney. Our case judge had been reluctant to grant me the divorce while I was in prison since Tracy was dead set against it. But with Tracy now pregnant with another man's child, he did a 180 and signed off on it, on my terms without Tracy's signature. My attorney also got an order prohibiting my name from being put on the birth certificate of Tracy's child. Needless to say, she was not happy. I couldn't give a fuck about her happiness. The gate opened, and I walked out, a free man for the first time in 778 days. I still had almost 3 years of probation on my 5-year sentence for third-degree felony assault, but unless I screwed up Major League, I was never going back inside. I laughed to myself, knowing that I wasn't exactly honest to the parole board several weeks ago. I told them I had truly regretted my actions that got me put in jail, and I would absolutely do my best to never repeat that mistake. In reality, the only thing I regretted was getting arrested, because if given the chance to do it again, I would do it again in a heartbeat, and maybe do worse. My lawyer was waiting for me beyond the gates. We shook hands, got in his car, and drove me to my new digs, a one-room apartment 1 town over, back in the town I lived in when my life as I knew it was destroyed. I didn't return to the scene of the crime, so to speak, willingly. I just figured it was the easiest place for a former convict to find employment. People knew why I spent time in jail, so it would be easier to find a job rather than having to explain the whole thing to someone who didn't know me. That strategy worked out well for me. 2 days later, I got a job with Wilkie Outdoor Concepts, an excavating and landscape company, probably because the owner is also an ex-con. Anyway, it was gainful employment, and I was happy to have it. The biggest disadvantage to my strategy was that I knew one day I would run into my bitch ex-wife and or her lover and baby daddy. It would be tough to hold my temper in check, and I really didn't want to go back to prison and finish my sentence. I ran my fingers down the scar from the side of my right eyebrow to the middle of my cheek, about 3 inches worth. It was my constant physical reminder of the worst stretch of my life, and that I was able to survive it. I had the world by the ass 3 years before, or so I thought. I had a loving wife of 22 years who was my other half, two great kids in college, a good job, and a nice house. That was before I found out my wife had been cheating on me for several months, with a much younger, bigger man who helped her get past feeling old and unwanted after our kids left home for college. Word of advice here, kids. No matter how tempting it is, never punch your wife's lover. It felt great at the time, but it cost me more than 2 years in prison. For the record, I broke his nose and 2 ribs. Yeah, oh. My job was primarily 3-season work, with layoffs happening in winter. I made good money when we were on, though, so with careful budgeting and unemployment, I could get by easily. I probably could have gone back to working as an accountant, hidden in the back room of somebody's firm. But I really enjoyed the physicality of the landscaping work, along with the fact that it didn't require too much thinking. In fact, it was almost the exact opposite of my previous work experience. After working outside for 3 years, my skin had actually darkened some and taken on a ruddier appearance, and I had gained about 20 pounds of muscle while losing what little body fat I had. Closing at 50, I was probably in the best physical condition of my life, with visible abs and bigger arms, chest, and back muscles. My once close-cropped dark brown hair had gone to seed and was now a salt and pepper shoulder-length mop of curls, which I occasionally pulled back into a ponytail on windy days so I could see better. I even indulged myself and got a tattoo on my left forearm, the word vanilla in cursive, covering an area of about 5 inches. It served as a reminder that I needed to be less of a nice guy and more take charge in my life, even if sometimes it made others unhappy. I would never forget my ex-wife's indictment of me in her text to her friend, telling her friend that her lover wasn't a nice guy like me but just took what he wanted, and how much that turned her on. I resolved to be that guy for the rest of my life, but I still didn't have the guts to have "fuck you" written on my arm. Vanilla would have to serve my purpose. I got the tattoo about a year after I got out of prison. I've had to explain its significance about 24 times in the 2 years since I've gotten it. "You're Dan Washburn, isn't you?" I said, a very sexy voice to my left as I sat at the bar at DeVito's place, a quiet bar, about 15 minutes from my apartment one Thursday night. DeVito's had Peacock and I didn't, so it was a good excuse for me to be social as I watched Thursday night football and drank a few beers. Although I didn't know her very well, I recognized the woman belonging to the sexy voice as Jan Jefferson, my ex-wife's best friend, and yes, that Jan Jefferson. To a degree, I blamed her for helping ruin my marriage, although I knew in reality that in her text with Tracy, she neither encouraged nor discouraged her friend's affair. Still, it was the old shoot the messenger thing, because those texts were how I found out about Tracy's affair. "Yeah, that's me," I responded to the tall, thin, pretty woman. What gave it away? The tattoo on my forearm or the one on my forehead? I guess the lighting in here is not very good. "I can't see anything on your forehead," she said earnestly while her eyes searched. "If you look closely enough, it says schmuck." I thought I had a great marriage. She thought otherwise, I said, with more than a little snarl in my voice. "You're looking good, Jan. To what do I owe the pleasure? Do you want to rub my ex-wife's infidelity in my face? Or do you want to tell me I was a fool for divorcing her?" I asked. I watched Jan's face morph from a smile to a grimace before I blatantly ran my eyes down her body. She was wearing a dark blue floral print sundress with spaghetti straps that ended about 4 inches above her knees and showed off a good amount of tanned skin. She was about the same age as I was, and I had to admit that she had taken good care of herself. I would have done her if the opportunity presented itself. "I could give you a twirl if you'd like," she said with a bit of playfulness in her voice. "All right. Let's see where this will go." I raised an index finger and made the motion for her to twirl. She did so with a smile on her face. The sundress lifted a bit higher than she did, which brought a smile to my face. "Nice." Very nice legs, I said as I wondered how they would look wrapped around my body. She gave me a small frown, and I had to wonder for a second if she could read my mind. I know I was mostly Tracy's friend, and we didn't know each other real well, but I wanted to come over and see how you were doing. I know the last several years haven't been good ones for you, she explained. I'm doing okay now. It's taken a bit, but almost everyone in town has been pretty helpful. Everybody knows the whole story by this point, and I've gotten a lot of support. No one treats me like a criminal. Well, a former criminal, I said. For the record, I didn't condone Tracy's affair. I knew about it, but I didn't condone it. I thought it was wrong, and you always seemed like a decent guy. I told her that she should have gotten a divorce from you before she screwed around, but she kept insisting she loved you, and if you never found out, she wasn't hurting you. We argued over that, because my ex cheated on me before I divorced him. Now, why? Did you ever consider telling me? I asked. She blushed hard and dropped her eyes. No, she whispered. She was my friend, and I only knew you a little bit. I guess you could say I was loyal to a fault. Jan was at the bar with a couple of friends who were also single. She invited me to join them at their table, and I did. The other women, Mary Jo and Ellie, were also friends with my ex. We had a pretty good evening talking. The only topics off limits were my divorce and my ex. I really like this new look you've got going on, Jan said at one point during the evening. Very not vanilla? I interjected. Definitely not vanilla, Jan said while tracing the tattoo on my forearm. But, to some of us, vanilla isn't necessarily a bad thing. To some of us, it means you're a nice guy, and nice guys don't always have to finish last if you get my drift. She blushed lightly and her friends smiled in return. At one point during the evening, all three women put their digits into my phone. Mary Jo started it by boldly asking if she could give me her number, and the others made sure they weren't outdone. 2 days later, I called Jan for a date. She suggested that in the interest of fairness, I should also call Mary Jo and Ellie and ask them out as well. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Then you can make an informed decision if you want to go forward with one, two, or all three of us. She was enthused. I laughed with her and told her that sounded like a good plan. It turned out to be a very good plan, and I had a good date with each woman. It wasn't an easy decision, but I decided to try Jan as the one with whom to move forward. Are you going to keep dating all three of us? She asked when I called for a second date. Yee, I would understand that, but I'm kind of hoping you'd give me first chance at locking you down. Too forward? I know if I don't ask, Mary Jo will. Walready bah. Not too forward, I assured her. We had sex on our next date. No, that would be an understatement of epic proportions. We made love for half the night. Yes, neither of us was what we were at 25, but there's a lot to be said for experience and emotion. An awful lot. I brought her off to several spectacular orgasms with my fingers before I slid down and just about wore off a layer of skin from my tongue. She screamed unintelligible syllables while I was doing that, and she was crying in pleasure when I finally stopped and crawled back up her body to plant my stiff rod in her warm and very wet velvet glove. The only time I understood her was when she moaned, "Oh, Dan," after her last orgasm of the night, right before I filled her for a second time. We kissed passionately for several more minutes before my hard-on finally softened, and I slid out of her. She was asleep in my arms almost immediately. I woke up the next morning to the feeling of her ass pushing back into my morning wood. As she said she was a little sore, we made very gentle love, then laid together in our afterglow. Wah! Vanilla for the win, she whispered to me a few minutes later. Jan and I dated for 6 months before I asked her to marry me. I never asked her if she maintained her friendship with Tracy, and if they ever talked about me, as I really didn't care. That part of my life was long since over. She at least thought about it, because when she stopped crying after I asked her to marry me, she told me that she would never pull a Tracy on me. One man, one woman, that's it. It might be vanilla for some, but it's perfect for me, she said. The relationship between Tracy and John ended several months after Tracy found out that her best friend was dating her ex-husband. You stole my husband, You slut, said Tracy, as she recalled the conversation to me. No, I didn't. You gave him up. He divorced you, Jan replied. You've got Neville now. Oh, right, Tracy said quietly. Tracy and Neville never married, so they didn't have to divorce when he walked out on her and their young son several years later, I found out. From what my kids told me, Tracy had become a shrew, pointing out to Neville that she didn't enjoy raising a child at a time in her life when she should have been enjoying past accomplishments and grandchildren. Apparently, his take-charge attitude in the bedroom had run its course, and the two didn't see eye to eye on too many aspects of their home life. She found a note on the kitchen table one day when she got home from work, my daughter told me. Shit happens, I replied blankly.